One morning, Togo and Poem are having their usual argument in front of the school. As the class monitor, Togo refuses to let Poem into the school due to her outfit, but Poem insists that she's following all the rules. She says that it is normal to have dyed hair in miniskirts nowadays, but Togo disagrees and points out the impracticality of wearing a short skirt. Still, Poem insists that his claim is untrue because he has never seen under her skirt before. To her surprise and embarrassment, Togo actually admits that he has seen under her skirt at least 3 times, and he even scolds her for her choice of undergarments. This eventually pisses her off enough to punch him in the gut before marching toward the school building, leaving Togo on the ground in pain. He tries to call her back but ends up throwing up from the impact. Later in Poem's classroom, her friends tease her about what happened. They mention how lucky she is since Togo does not know her name. She realizes that if he does figure it out, he might spend his entire free time hounding her. Their teacher then calls her aside and asks her to stay after class. During the supplementary lessons, Poem grumbles over her situation since she is the only one left in the classroom. To her surprise, Togo enters the room. It takes him a moment to notice her, but he regards her calmly when he does. He tells her that the math teacher had to attend to something, so she only needs to complete an activity sheet before heading home. Poem takes the paper relieved but gets shocked when Togo takes the seat next to her and starts answering the worksheet as well. After a while, Poem finishes her work and prepares to leave, but she notices that Togo appears to be struggling. Since the problems seem simple enough, she teasingly asks him if he is dumb. The truth hits him harshly, and he admits that he does not do well with actual schoolwork. Poem teases him about it, and to her surprise, he accepts it without argument. He explains that as the class monitor, he needs to set an example, so it is shameful for him to be bad at school. Poem suddenly gets an idea and cheekily asks him if he wants her to tutor him in math. Togo flatly replies that he needs to solve the problems on his own. Poem complains about his stubbornness and inflexibility. She tells him that they are technically still in class and they are not taking a quiz, so he should allow himself to be taught even by a fellow student. After considering her point, he finally allows Poem to teach him. By sunset, they are done and Togo thanks her for all her help, including the new insight about himself. He also tells her that he realized she is kind. Poem feels confident after receiving the compliment and jumps onto the ledge, asking him to permit her hair and skirt. However, Togo flatly states that he cannot permit her choice of attire. She quickly covers her legs when his eyes drift there. Togo tells her that she is objectively pretty, so he would hate it if something horrible were to happen to her. Poem blushes at the compliment, and Togo admits that he had also learned her name today since it was written on the activity sheet. He gets her last name correctly, but mispronounces her first name. Poem angrily punches him again and corrects him on the proper pronunciation of her name. Later, she is surprised when Togo locks the school gate and learns that he is the first one to arrive each morning to open it. He proudly claims that as the class monitor, it is part of his sworn duty, though Poem thinks he should focus more on his studies instead. When Togo calls out her name, she punches him again for being too familiar. He struggles with the pain but still tells Poem that it is dangerous to walk home alone this late. Poem teasingly suggests that he walk her home, but Togo takes the suggestion seriously and agrees, mentioning that her outfit is too revealing, which earns him another punch. As they walk, Poem asks what his first name is and he eventually gives her his full name. Poem tries to make small talk with him, but all his answers are very flat. She points it out, and Togo admits that his father is very strict, which resulted in his boring and stiff personality. Poem asks why he does not hate his father for that. If it were her, she would have hated him. Togo accidentally uses her first name, which results in an angry reaction from her. She tells him that her name is embarrassing and she knows it will haunt her until she is old. She also complains that it does not suit her at all. Suddenly, her mother calls and she quickly turns away from Togo so she can answer her phone. Togo quietly observes her as Poem tells her mother that she wants her portion of dinner because she had been looking forward to the meal. When she gets off the phone and nervously faces Togo again, he tells her that she is very cute, which immediately earns him another punch to the gut. She then tells him that they should hurry home and he agrees, mentioning that her dinner will get cold. Poem tries to keep her head down as she walks forward. When they finally reach her door, she thanks him for seeing her back safely. As he prepares to leave, Poem tells Togo that it is fine if they use each other's first names. She then smiles to herself when she hears him say her name again. As she watches him walk away, she remembers that he attended the middle school nearby. She is shocked to realize that he lives just a few houses away, and she quickly runs up to him to confirm it. He admits that he was also surprised by how close they lived to each other, and then Poem remembers their earlier conversation, and everything begins to make sense. On another day, at a fast food joint, Poem's friends chat with her, but her thoughts remain focused on Togo. Rui suddenly asks if she walked home with Togo, which makes Poem spit out her drink and deny it furiously. She decides that she cannot let her friends know the truth. However, Tomo suddenly appears by the window and scolds them for hanging out after class since it is against the rules. He then enters the cafe so he can take their class information. Rui and Motoko easily give theirs. Poem tries to signal him by winking, but he completely misses the point and thinks she is flirting with him, so he scolds her by using her first name. She immediately gets mad at him for using it because now her friends will know that something happened. Rui eventually decides to ask when the two of them became friends. Togo notices that her friends call her Po instead of Poem, and they reveal that they have been calling her that since they were children. However, as Poem grew older, she realized how embarrassing her name sounded and asked them to use her last name. Togo complains about this because he believes it is a great name. Rui and Motoko both agree with him and invite him to sit with them. Rui even offers him some coffee. Before he allows himself to take a sip, Togo suddenly realizes that the girls are trying to make him an accomplice, so he quickly stops. The two girls continue to tease him, which makes Poem wonder what they are planning. When they grab him and try to force him to drink, they insist that Poem join in and use her own coffee. Poem becomes embarrassed because she has already taken several sips from it, so in the spur of the moment, she quickly chugs her drink down, burning her tongue in the process. When they finally leave the area, Togo reminds them not to hang out in public after school. The three girls then walk home together, and Poem apologizes for Togo's behavior. However, her friends admit that they actually enjoyed their time because Togo was surprisingly fun to be around. Suddenly, Poem excuses herself from her friends. She runs after Togo and tries to explain her actions earlier. She also mentions her friends, insisting that although they tried to tease him, they are actually good people. Togo responds that he understands because they are her friends. However, he still reminds Poem that the next time they are caught breaking the rules, they will have to write an essay as punishment. Poem is about to thank him, but her friends suddenly appear behind her and ask if it is okay for them to head home first and then go out again later for tea. Togo pauses to think about it before saying that it should be allowed. Hearing that, the two girls happily decide to invite him for tea someday, and he even agrees. Poem is about to complain about the situation, but Rui quickly tells her that they are not going to steal her new interest. The next day, the three girls are running away from Togo, who is loudly scolding them for rushing toward the cafeteria. As they round the corner, Motoko suddenly trips, but she is thankfully caught by Yu, who is also part of the committee with Togo. The girls are shocked and Yu begins scolding them about safety. Togo finally catches up to them and thanks Yu for saving Motoko. He then introduces Yu as the one in charge of health in their committee. The girls are surprised by this, so Yu proudly shows off the long white coat he is wearing, with the words health representative clearly written on the back. However, Poem complained that he looks like a gang member. Yu decides to ignore her and instead scolds Togo for not doing his job properly. Togo calmly accepts the reprimand, but he also points out that Yu is not doing his job either. Togo explains that Motoko twisted her ankle earlier. However, Yu did not notice this and even failed to properly check on her well-being after saving her. This realization makes Yu immediately rush toward Motoko and grab her shoulders, insisting that she admit her injuries. Once she tells him the truth, he quickly lifts her into his arms and passionately rushes toward the nurse's office. Poem and Togo watch them leave, and Poem realizes that the two boys are equally passionate about their jobs. The next day, Rui shares that she learned Yu was a former delinquent. She mentions that he has toned down a lot, and apparently his princess carries are popular in school. When Poem doubts that any of this is true, Rui simply points out Motoko's love-struck expression. Later, during the school assembly, Poem begins to wonder what it would feel like to be carried like a princess. Instead of imagining Yu, she pictures Togo carrying her instead. As she tries to shake the strange thought away, she notices a girl nearby complaining about the heat. She soon realizes that it is unusually hot, and the students in front of her begin complaining as well. Slowly, she becomes aware that she is starting to feel faint. Suddenly, Yu steps forward and calls everyone's attention. He announces that he brought fever patches for everyone and asks the students to raise their hands so he can distribute them. Just then, Togo grabs his arm and insists that he help distribute them as a way of thanking Yu for pointing out his mistake. The two boys quickly reach an understanding, and Poem finds herself growing annoyed as she watches them aggressively handing out cooling patches. However, the heat soon becomes too much for her, and she suddenly faints. Rui immediately alerts Togo and Yu, but by that time, both boys have already run out of cooling patches. They quickly decide that they need to bring Poem to the nurse's office and begin racing toward her, each insisting that he should be the one to carry her there. Poem's gaze lands on both figures as they rush toward her, and she briefly imagines herself being carried by either Togo or Yu. For some reason, the thought makes her angry. Suddenly, she finds the strength to punch both of them as they reach her. Later in the infirmary, her friends tease her for missing her chance to be carried like a princess. As the girls laugh together, both Togo and Yu talk quietly about her nearby. Yu comments that she seems like a delinquent, but Togo simply smiles and says that Poem is actually a very nice girl. One morning, Poem and Togo are having their usual argument at the school gates. Togo even measures her skirt with his hands to prove a point, which earns him a kick from her. Over lunch, Poem's friends tease her about her closeness with Togo. They feel happy that Poem is finally letting a specific guy get close to her, since she used to beat up any boy who tried to get to know her back in middle school. As she walks through the hallway, she blames Togo for all the misunderstandings surrounding her lately, and to her surprise, he suddenly appears right next to her. They end up stopping by a vending machine where Togo learns that she is planning to go to the library to take a nap. He feels concerned that she will not be able to sleep at night if she naps during the day. He then shares that for him, he is currently on his usual lunchtime patrol. At the library, Poem decides to read a book instead of napping. While looking around, she spots an interesting-looking book placed on the topmost shelf and tries to reach it. City Chief, a member of the book committee, manages to get the book for her with ease. When she thanks him, she notices that he seems a little too perfect at this task, so she takes a closer look at his ID and sees that he is part of the committee, just like Togo. Seiichi introduces himself politely and explains that he is happy that she is finally using the library properly, pointing out that she used to spend most of her time sleeping. He then gestures to all the books around them, eagerly encouraging her to try reading as many as possible. Poem feels hesitant since reading does not seem to fit her image. The compliment does not please her, but Seiichi quickly recommends a different book after noticing that she seemed to enjoy the previous one. Poem accepts the book, and as she looks at him, she notices that a group of girls is gathered nearby and is now vying for Seiichi's attention. She watches as he politely talks to the girls, and she slowly realizes that despite appearing pretentious, he actually takes his responsibilities very seriously. Because of that realization, she decides to give reading the book a proper chance. One afternoon, she talks about her encounter with Seiichi to Togo. He confirms that they know each other and seems surprised that Poem actually wanted to go to the library to read. He then offers to introduce Seiichi to her since they are in the same class. Back in the classroom, Poem has a hard time believing that the quiet, nerdy, and introverted boy sitting at his desk is actually Seiichi. Although there are some similarities, he does not give off the same confident aura that he had in the library. When Togo tries to introduce them, Seiichi does not seem to remember her or pay much attention to her at all. This immediately causes Poem to argue with Togo, while Seiichi grumbles in irritation because he wanted to spend his free time reading and not watch them bicker. His attitude irritates Poem even more, which prompts Togo to explain that only the people in their class know about Seiichi's other personality. Later, Seiichi suddenly transforms into the charming library assistant persona that Poem had met earlier, and Togo concludes his explanation about Seiichi's personality. Seiichi apologizes for his earlier rude behavior, claiming that he can only be his true self when he is surrounded by the books he loves. Poem begins to wonder if this charming version is truly his real self, but then she quickly demands that he stop calling her Sleeping Beauty. He agrees to stop, but then darkly comments that he thought it was a less embarrassing alternative to her real name. Togo becomes curious about the origin of the nickname, and Seiichi explains that he started calling her that because she always slept in the library. However, he feels that Snoring Princess might suit her better. Poem immediately insists that she does not snore, while Togo complains to Seiichi, saying that Poem is still cute even if she does snore. Out of embarrassment, she slaps Togo with a fan, although deep down she feels happy about the compliment. As Seiichi and Togo continue chatting, Poem begins to notice that despite maintaining his prince-like persona, Seiichi can be slightly mean. Poem also notices that Togo looks visibly shocked when Seiichi calls him lonely, so she quickly tells Seiichi to apologize. Instead of apologizing, Seiichi teases her by mentioning that Togo is her boyfriend, which causes Poem to lose her temper and throw him outside the library. As soon as he passes the door, he immediately switches back into his gloomy, nerdy self. Later that afternoon, Poem tries to cheer Togo up after realizing that he does not seem to have any close friends. Togo attempts to convince himself that it is perfectly fine since school should not be about making friends. To cheer him up, Poem firmly slaps his back and confidently declares that she considers him one of her friends. The effect is surprisingly immediate, and Togo beams at her, touched by her kindness. Just then, her friends sneak up behind her and begin teasing her, claiming that she actually wants to be his significant other. After teasing Poem for a while, Rui and Motoko also tell Togo that he can consider them his friends as well. One afternoon, her friends were hoping to eat lunch with her, but Poem suddenly sneaks away to rummage through her belongings because she realizes that her lunchbox is missing. She clearly remembers that her mother, Yumi, had placed it in her bag that morning, so she is certain that she must have lost it somewhere. Suddenly, Togo appears nearby and comments on how unusual it is that Poem is not with her friends. She decides to tell him about her missing lunchbox, which immediately makes him worried. He insists that they start looking for it right away. They return to her classroom to search again, but they still cannot find it. Poem even mentions that she never took the lunchbox out of her bag. Togo begins to think deeply about the situation and suggests that it might be a case of theft, but Poem quickly dismisses the idea, saying that no one would go out of their way to steal a lunchbox. Togo wants to believe her, but he still insists that they need to find the lunchbox to prove that everyone in the school is innocent, even though Poem no longer wants to make a big deal out of it. They decide to retrace her steps, and Togo recalls that they had their usual argument at the school gates that morning. However, he believes she would not have lost the lunchbox there because the area was too crowded. So the next place they check is the infirmary. Earlier that morning, Poem had slipped and needed to stop by and get a bandage. Yu, who is currently eating his lunch, confirms the events from earlier. He explains that he had scolded Poem for being careless and not having a bandage, so he made her choose between a panda or bear-printed bandage. He then turned around to get some water to wash her wound, only to scold her again for already applying medicine before cleaning it. Since no one mentions seeing her lunchbox, they decide to move on to the next location, although Poem begins to lose motivation because she's already very hungry. They arrive at the library where Seiichi informs them that Poem had indeed been there earlier to return a book. However, he believes it is unlikely that anyone would have stolen the lunchbox since most of the students who visited were too preoccupied with him to pay attention to Poem. Seiichi points out that Togo's theory about theft is highly unlikely, and Poem agrees with him. However, Togo refuses to completely dismiss the possibility because Poem might have a stalker that they are unaware of. Seiichi immediately begins snickering and breaking character because the idea of Poem having a stalker sounds ridiculous to him. Annoyed, Poem knocks him on the head before leaving the library. Togo then asks where they should check next, and Poem blushes before quietly telling him that they do not need to check there. Togo becomes confused since it is important to cover every place she has visited. Poem finally admits that she went to the restroom earlier, which makes Togo equally embarrassed. He loudly agrees that they should not check there since food should never be brought into the restroom. His loud reaction makes Poem even more embarrassed. She slaps him again, and the two of them continue walking through the halls while thinking about the missing lunchbox. So far, they cannot think of anywhere else she might have left it since she stayed in the classroom for most of the day. Togo soon notices that they are walking along the outdoor corridor, and Poem admits that she likes this route because it allows her to see the hydrangeas growing outside. Hearing that, Togo smiles at her because he finds this softer side of her charming. Just then, Poem's stomach loudly grumbles, and she finally decides to give up the search and eat lunch in the cafeteria with her friends instead. She invites Togo to join them since he spent most of his lunchtime helping her search. At that moment, Togo suddenly becomes aware how hungry he is as well. When they arrive at the cafeteria, Motoko and Rui quickly invite them to sit down. They ask where Poem has been all this time, and she admits that she lost something and that she and Togo had been retracing her steps. Rui casually mentions that Poem must have gone to the infirmary and the library if she retraced her steps. Her statement causes Togo to freeze as he suddenly realizes something. He decides to test his theory and asks Rui how she knew where they went. Rui answers casually that she was with Poem the entire time that morning. Togo feels a painful sense of realization, knowing that the truth might hurt Poem, but he decides that he must reveal his findings. Right then and there, he accuses Rui of stealing Poem's lunchbox. At first, Rui looks confused, but then something clicks in her mind and she suddenly begins acting like a dramatic villain, delivering exaggerated villain-like lines. The girls immediately recognize that Rui is simply playing around, but Togo takes her performance very seriously and firmly demands that she return the lunchbox. Still pretending to be the villain, Rui declares that she has already eaten Poem's lunch. Hearing that, Togo collapses dramatically onto the ground in despair, convinced that he has failed Poem. Motoko then gently asks Poem if she sometimes disappears to eat lunch alone because she feels embarrassed about her lunchbox. Poem blushes while Motoko reassures her that she can still eat with them. Just then, they hear an announcement calling Poem to meet her mother outside the school. When they arrive at the entrance, they see Yumi there holding Poem's lunchbox. Yumi immediately apologizes for forgetting to place the lunchbox in Poem's bag earlier that morning. She explains that she rushed to the school to deliver it personally so that Poem would not go hungry. The girls greet Yumi warmly since they have met her before during visits. Then Yumi suddenly notices Togo standing nearby. Togo prepares to introduce himself politely, but Yumi quickly cuts him off and cheerfully mentions that Poem talks about him quite often at home. Curious about the contents of Poem's lunchbox, her friends ask Yumi to show them what she prepared. Feeling proud, Yumi opens the lunchbox to reveal the meal inside. Her friends had suspected that the lunch would be something cute, which was why Poem felt embarrassed, but the actual result exceeds their expectations. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, Poem screams toward the sky. They eventually return to the cafeteria and begin eating the lunch together, but Poem refuses to take a bite because she still feels too embarrassed about it. Togo gently tries to reassure her, insisting that everything is perfectly fine. He even mentions that he used to watch that same anime all the time with his younger sister. In fact, he confidently declares that he considers it a masterpiece. Poem quickly corrects him, explaining that it is not just that one anime. Her mother tends to make anime-themed lunches whenever she has the chance, although it does not happen very often because Yumi has a busy schedule. Poem admits that she finds it embarrassing, but she also cannot bring herself to ask her mother to stop because Yumi genuinely enjoys making those lunches for her. Ruby then turns to Togo and asks for his honest opinion about Poem's confession. After thinking for a moment, Togo sincerely admits that he believes Poem is very kind toward her mother and that the cute lunches suit her perfectly. Hearing that comment makes Poem even more embarrassed. One morning, Poem and her friends are shocked to see Nadeshiko, whom they do not recognize as the student council president, enter the school despite how revealingly she's dressed. Poem decides to hike up her skirt since she feels challenged. When Togo notices, he immediately scolds her, but this only angers Poem. Togo explains that Nadeshiko is a special case, which makes Poem remember when Togo told her the same thing. Feeling insulted, Poem decides to send a powerful kick his way, leaving him on the ground. Back in their classroom, Poem is still bothered, and her friends ask if she is curious about Nadeshiko. Poem decides to ask Yu about Nadeshiko, describing how she looks since they still do not know her name. Yu agrees to help the girls look for her, and they soon spot her turning a corner. Yu immediately dashes ahead, but by the time Poem and her friends catch up to him, he's already lying on the ground. This only makes Poem determined to find out who Nadeshiko really is, so she continues the search. Poem runs around the halls. She then realizes that Nadeshiko might have gone to the library, so Poem bursts inside, only to be greeted by Seiichi. Seiichi feigns ignorance, which immediately annoys Poem. She tries to shake an answer out of him, but Seiichi insists that he does not know anything. Eventually, Seiichi tells her not to get involved with Nadeshiko. Poem catches a glimpse of Nadeshiko and quickly rushes after her. As she runs, she begins to wonder if Togo might be getting threatened by her. Soon, she spots Nadeshiko speaking with Togo, and from the looks of it, Togo even seems flustered. She hears Togo voice his concern about calling her attractive. Poem feels disappointed because she now believes Togo simply says those things to every girl. She finally steps out and scolds Togo for his words since he sounds like a womanizer. She loudly declares that his behavior even destroys moral discipline. Togo collapses in disbelief as Nadeshiko laughs beside him. After saying her piece, Poem turns to leave, but she is suddenly stopped by Nadeshiko, who knows her name. Nadeshiko shares that she is aware Poem wants to ask her something, so she invites her for a chat. Nadeshiko begins brainstorming what girls usually do when they want to talk and suddenly gets an idea. To Poem's surprise, instead of ending up in some intense confrontation, they find themselves sitting in a bubble tea shop. Nadeshiko explains that she has wanted to know why girls enjoy going there after school. Nadeshiko then points toward Togo, and Poem notices that he is secretly spying on them. Nadeshiko explains that she granted them special permission to hang out today, but it seems Togo is still keeping an eye on them. She comments that Togo is a very dedicated person but lacks playfulness, and Poem slowly begins to feel more relaxed around her. Nadeshiko then shares that recently there have been complaints about girls wearing revealing outfits. Instead of simply making the rules stricter, she decided that she wanted to understand why girls would want to alter the school uniform in the first place, which is why she chose to dress differently. Nadeshiko then glances at Poem's skirt, mentioning that she also wears hers shorter than usual and asks if it is meant to attract boys. Poem immediately spits out her drink and quickly explains that she only wears it that way because it is fashionable. Nadeshiko replies that she understands because she has now experienced wearing trendy items. However, she also says that she can understand Togo's concerns because it can be difficult for boys to look away when girls show more skin. She pulls Poem's skirt down to the proper length and reminds her to keep things in moderation before walking away. Poem stares after her in confusion before hearing Togo call out from behind. Togo mentions that Poem seems to be in a bad mood and says that he wanted to check if she was okay. Poem replies that she has already gotten over the issue. Togo apologizes for his own immaturity and thoughtlessness earlier that day. He encourages Poem to call him out whenever he does something that she does not like, such as calling other girls attractive. She insists she's over it, but Togo steps forward to stand directly in front of her. He honestly admits that the first time he ever called someone attractive was Poem, and that the only girl he considers truly wonderful is also Poem. Poem blushes deeply at his sincere confession and reassures him that they are cool with each other again. Relieved that they are still on good terms, Togo happily promises that he will only compliment her from now on, which makes Poem slightly annoyed at him. Poem finally asks Togo who Nadeshiko really is. Togo looks surprised that Poem did not recognize her and explains that Nadeshiko is a very prominent figure in the school and is usually present during major events. This makes Poem start thinking about who she could possibly be. The next day, almost as if she magically transformed into someone completely different, Nadeshiko appears in her usual attire as she addresses the entire school. Poem realizes that Nadeshiko is the student council president, which explains why all the committee members seem afraid of her. One day, during a council meeting, the student council begins discussing what to do for the upcoming fundraiser. Makishima, the treasurer, presents her proposal, which is nearly approved, but Kaoru, the vice president, quickly rejects it. Kaoru complains that the plan is too small and will only earn pocket change. However, Nadeshiko calmly responds that she believes it is still a good way to collect money. She tells Kaoru that he likely does not understand how effective the plan could be or how much effort is required to make it successful, especially since he comes from a wealthy family. She then points out that Kaoru was the one who filed a complaint about girls wearing their skirts too short. Nadeshiko firmly states that the standard skirt length is already reasonable. She then suggests that everyone cool off and drink some bubble tea together so they can better understand the student's perspective. Kaoru becomes irritated by her suggestion, but eventually agrees and sits down again. Nadeshiko acknowledges his concern, admitting that giving a small amount shouldn't be the goal. She encourages everyone to contribute in whatever way they can. Kaoru quietly stares at Nadeshiko, fully aware that this is her way of declaring a challenge. Determined not to lose, he confidently swears that he will raise more money than Nadeshiko. Nadeshiko and Kaoru have always had this sort of rivalry. They are known throughout the school as the Beauty and the Beast duo. After school, Kaoru trudges home, grumbling about Nadeshiko. As he steps into his limousine, he swears that he will win this time. He tells his driver to head to the bubble tea shop because he wants to understand the hype. After a week, Nadeshiko stands by the gate collecting change from the students. Suddenly, Poem and her friends brightly greet her. Motoko and Rui both ask about her gout getup, but Nadeshiko admits that the outfit will not be making its return. When she thanks Rui and Motoko for the praise, both of them feel blessed since they never thought the student council president knew them. Poem donates some change, and the girls then eye Togo, waiting for him to donate as well. Togo pales and says that he already donated earlier. Togo stares at his last 500 yen coin, which is the last of his lunch money. Nadeshiko tries to get him to donate it, guilt-tripping him for being selfish. Yu arrives and puts his donations so Nadeshiko and her crew will stop pressuring Togo to pay. Poem greets him as usual, but Nadeshiko tells him that she was only joking. Yu sighs because it is clear the comment is affecting Togo. Togo shares that the coin was given to him by his mother, so he refuses to let it go. He kneels on the ground and asks if he can help with the fundraiser instead of donating. Nadeshiko breezily accepts his help, but Poem has a feeling that Nadeshiko set it up. Nadeshiko then approaches Yu and asks for his aid too. At first, Yu refuses, but he ends up agreeing when Nadeshiko threatens to tell everyone how she managed to pulverize him. Motoko then gets inspired to help out as well. Poem does not want to at first, but then she sees Togo's puppy dog eyes directed at her, so she finds herself volunteering. Tokoro, a council member, thinks that Nadeshiko is amazing for assembling a group of volunteers outside the council. Kaoru is not impressed, saying that she's only using her usual techniques. In order to catch up, he declares that he needs allies of his own. Kaoru heads to the field where he asks for an alliance with the baseball team, but they are all hesitant because they have practice to worry about. Kaoru tries to insult them so they will agree, while Tokoro tries to keep the tension under control. The team captain decides to agree if Kaoru manages to put an AC unit in their club room. He promises to consider it, so the team captain announces the good news to the team. Tokoro wonders if this is a good idea, and Kaoru shares that the council will likely be on board, but in case they are not, you can always cover the expenses for the AC. Meanwhile, Togo and Poem are dragging Seiichi out of the library so he can help as well, but he tries to keep himself halfway inside. He insults Nadeshiko, causing Poem and Togo to pale because Nadeshiko is watching. Nadeshiko insists that they pull him out anyway. When they do, he turns back to his normal self. Later, both sides are asking for donations. Poem notices that Seiichi manages to keep his princely form up while collecting donations. Seiichi scoffs and admits that Nadeshiko made him a small portable library to help him maintain his form. Yu shows up, bringing several of his delinquent friends to help out, but Poem thinks it is a horrible idea. Nadeshiko returns and shares that they have already covered the school, so they need to head to town. Like a gang leader, Nadeshiko leads the delinquents to town. Tokoro immediately informs Kaoru of the plan to go to town. In town, both groups once again call out to citizens to donate as much cash as they can. By evening, Kaoru and Tokoro return to the office, and Kaoru shares that he has no idea how much they made since he is not used to dealing with coins. Tokoro expresses confidence that it is a large amount and there is no need to open the box. After correcting Kaoru over his name, he decides to head home. Once left alone, Kaoru pulls out a wad of cash and considers adding it to his donation box. He convinces himself that it is not cheating since he is free to donate as much as he wants. But then he remembers Nadeshiko's words, which makes him reconsider his actions. The next morning, as the tallying begins, Tokoro notices that Kaoru has deep eye bags. Makishima announces that Nadeshiko collected 55,211 yen, and Kaoru collected 56,480 yen. Kaoru smiles and lets out an evil laugh since he won, waiting for Nadeshiko to comment on his victory. To his surprise, Narashiko smiles and praises him for his hard work, and everyone else as well, because they are now the only school in Tokyo to collect such a large amount of money. Kaoru is confused, but then recalls that Narashiko had never issued a challenge in the first place. He feels his vision blur, realizing that Narashiko successfully tricked him into working hard. He faints due to fatigue, causing Tokoro to panic and gather him in his arms. Later, when Kaoru begins walking home, Narashiko suddenly hands him a cup of milk tea to celebrate. Kaoru complains that he does not like it because of its sweetness, but Narashiko then tells him that she caught him working late doing road repairs. She asks if he placed his paycheck in the donation box, which he admits he did because it was significantly less than the money in his wallet. Kaoru finally takes a sip of his drink and is shocked to find that it is not sweet. Narashiko shares that she already knew not to get him something sweet. They both begin calling each other by their first names, reminding Kaoru that he has known her since they were children, and that since then, Narashiko has always beaten him. He silently vows that in their next competition, he will win. One morning, Togo gets ready for his early morning patrol. As Togo leaves his house, his eyes drift to Poen's place because Poen lives close by. Togo wonders if Poen is still asleep. As he walks, he cannot help but notice Lyric, who looks just like Poen. He takes another look and even calls out Poen's name since he thinks it's her. Lyric looks at him and he realizes that she is not Poen. Lyric tells him that Poen is actually her older sister. At home, Poen's mother, Yumi, tries to convince her to go downstairs for breakfast. Poen decides to wake up and sees that it is still relatively early. However, Poen ends up dragging herself out of bed to have breakfast anyway. On her way down, her mother advises her to at least wash up before eating, but Poen refuses, claiming she can do it later. When she opens the door to the dining room, she is shocked to see Lyric chatting with Togo, and it seems that she walked in just as they were talking about her legs. Poen bolts away before they can see her so she can wash her face first. She re-enters and scolds Togo for being in her house unannounced, demanding to know if Lyric was the one who let him in. However, Lyric denies it and tells her that Yumi was the one who invited Togo inside to have breakfast with them. Togo apologizes for having breakfast there, acknowledging that it was rude of him to come in. He is about to leave, but then realizes he has not finished eating yet, which would also be rude since Yumi prepared the food, so he begins shoving the rest into his mouth. Poen looks at him with concern, and Lyric suddenly gets an idea. She tells Togo to stay a little longer since no one really has a problem with him having breakfast. She also tells Poen that she should change out of her pajamas so Togo can at least finish his breakfast comfortably before leaving. Poen eventually leaves to do just that, and Lyric thinks to herself that Poen is a troublesome sister since she can easily see through her. Later, once Poen is dressed for the day, they gather in the living room where Lyric asks about their relationship. Togo confirms that they are not in a relationship since romantic relationships at their school are prohibited. Though he admits that he is interested in romance, he understands that, as a student, his duty is to focus on studying, which Poen finds ironic since he has terrible grades. Lyric decides that it is a good answer since it means that Poen might still have a chance. Poen gets frustrated over Lyric's questions and even panics when Lyric asks about Togo's type. The question seems to stump Togo, as he has never seriously considered what he actually likes in a girl. He suggests the possibility of liking someone proper and elegant, but then realizes those are qualities he strives for himself, so it feels improper to expect that from a potential partner. Lyric decides to cut in and ask if Poen could possibly be his type, since she is not exactly proper or well-mannered but can be surprisingly cute. Togo answers that he does find Poen very cute and a well-rounded woman, which causes Poen to hit him out of embarrassment. His answer confuses Lyric since, from her perspective, the two of them clearly seem interested in each other. Poen gets angry at her, and Togo tries to calm the situation down. Yumi then arrives carrying a stack of souffle pancakes and tells Togo that he does not need to worry about the girls since they are actually very close siblings. Yumi insists that they enjoy the pancakes she made, which have drawings on them. Both girls become embarrassed by their mother's antics, but Togo thinks the food looks amazing. Yumi begins telling Togo about the time she brought her daughters to watch the movie in theaters. The movie was rather intense, featuring an epic battle scene where the heroes were nearly defeated by their opponent. Lyric cried because it seemed like the end, but Poen at that time expressed confidence that they would win. The movie included an interactive segment where the audience could send lights to the characters using the light wands they were given. Poen encouraged Lyric to follow along with what the characters on the screen were asking them to do. Yuri had been so touched by how innocently adorable her daughters were that she joined in the cheering and chanting as well, even louder than they did. Back in the present, both girls cringe at the memory and insist that their mother lead the conversation. Togo thinks they should let Yumi stay and insists that she sit closer so he can hear more stories. The group ends up talking until late in the afternoon, and it is not until sunset that Togo finally takes his leave. Poen is surprised that she actually enjoyed spending an entire day with him at home, while Yumi insists that he come visit again before being shooed away by Poen. Togo mentions that he has not been able to hang out at a friend's house since grade school, so today was a very special experience for him. Poem feels a little embarrassed by how intimate the day turned out and mentions that she is glad her father is not around since he is the nosiest. She apologizes for Lyric's prying earlier, but Togo tells her that he did not mind it. He mentions that he has a younger sister as well, so he is used to those kinds of questions. For some reason, his answer disappoints Poem. Poem tries to act natural about it as Togo begins walking back to his house. However, when Poem thinks he can no longer hear her, she quietly whispers that Togo should have taken things a little more seriously and calls him a dummy. Togo catches a faint hint of her words and turns around to ask if she said anything. Poem becomes embarrassed and briefly considers telling the truth, but ultimately shoos him away. Togo continues walking home, and Lyric tells Poem to just give up on Togo. She believes he is a little strange, and she worries that Togo will only keep Poem waiting until graduation since he seems determined to follow all the school rules strictly. Instead of addressing Lyric, Poem becomes furious because to her, Lyric spent the entire day teasing her, even though Lyric insists she did all of it for Poem's sake. In the end, Poem ends up chasing Lyric down the street. Meanwhile, Togo stops to think about what Poem meant when she told him to take it seriously, since he actually hurt her. One day after school, Poem enjoys a huge creep before realizing she is going to get in trouble if Togo catches her. She'd already imagined what he would say and even acts it out herself. She sighs because she thinks following the rules is preventing her from enjoying things. She then sees Togo in front of her, looking at her shop to find something to buy for Poem's family to thank them for their hospitality. Togo then finds an extension cord for the family and decides it is something they can all enjoy using, though Poem comments that they do not need it. Togo is shocked by her sudden appearance as she tries to make sense of what he is doing. He explains that the gift is for welcoming him into her house and feeding him, though Poem insists that they do not need a gift, especially a power strip. They sit on a bench and Poem tells him that it is a bad idea because Uni will just end up baking him cookies in return for the gift. Togo gets fired up and says that he will simply give her more gifts in exchange. Poem sighs because this is exactly what she feared. She insists that sincere feelings are already enough. Thinking about her words, Togo asks if he can say his thanks in person by coming over again today. Poem tells him that it is not possible, which makes Togo realize that it has already gotten late. Poem decides to tease him about breaking the rules since he is out shopping after school. However, Togo tells her that he is not breaking the rules because he had already gone home earlier. The logic seems strange to Poem, but he points out that the rule only applies if you are heading home for the first time that day. She then asks why he decided to wear his uniform band if he had already gone home, and he replies confidently that he is the class monitor and he even wore it the day he visited her house for the first time. He then asks what she is doing out in town, and Poem decides to lie her way out of the situation. Walking side by side, Togo mentions that he really likes Poem's family. He talks about how kind everyone is and says that he can see why Poem grew up to be honest and kind. He then enthusiastically talks about how much he loved the pancakes, which reminds Poem of how embarrassed she felt. She threatens to punch him for bringing it up. Continuing their walk, he mentions wanting to get a chance to meet Poem's father. Poem immediately tells Togo that it is better that he did not meet her father because he is annoying. She explains that her father would probably even punch him upon meeting him. Poem is about to tell him more, but when she turns to look at Togo, he is already gone. Meanwhile, Poem's father, Rhyme, walks the streets intending to finally head home to his beloved family. He reminisces about his former life and how he could have been considered a delinquent back then. However, after meeting Yumi and having Poem, he decided to leave that life behind and become a dedicated family man. Now he has 2 teenage daughters who barely talk to him, which he assumes is normal for girls their age. Though during the rare times when they do speak to him, they usually insist that he rest, which he interprets as their way of showing concern. He believes he managed to raise good children and that he truly loves the life he is now. As he walks, he notices a crowd gathered for a cipher. Watching the rappers reminds him of his youth before he met Yumi, when ciphers were his passion. Now he watches younger kids try it out and fail rather poorly. He cannot help but judge the rapper, and he begins forming a rap in his head. As it threatens to slip out, he quickly covers his mouth, reminding himself that he does not need to rap. Suddenly, he sees Togo attempting to stop the cipher. Togo apparently recognizes several people in the circle as students from his school and begins reprimanding them. The rappers recognize him immediately and do not appreciate that he came to ruin their fun. A rapper begins dissing him through the cipher, making sure to point out his negative traits. When he finishes, the crowd cheers. Rhyme recognizes this tactic as a way to publicly shame Togo, since it is clear that Togo knows nothing about rap. Togo takes a moment to understand how the battle works and suddenly turns the tables by rapping back far better than anyone expected. When he finishes his verse, the crowd becomes amused and cheers loudly for him. Even Rhyme is shocked. He observes the cipher in front of him and realizes that although Togo's skills are only average, his message makes sense, and people seem to be enjoying it. Instead of insulting Togo, the crowd begins mocking the one who challenged him in the first place. The rapper decides to respond, rapping about not caring about school and how he wants to live. The crowd goes wild, but Rhyme finds the rap rather dull since it is mostly a combination of reused phrases. Rhyme finds himself eager to hear Togo's final response, but Togo instead replies that he thinks the rapper is actually very smart. To him, creating raps on the spot is a demonstration of mental ability and talent. He also says that he envies how the group seems to have strong bonds and suggests that they start a rap club at school. The rapper is touched, especially since Togo is offering to help them establish a club at the school. To Togo, that is simply his duty as the class monitor. He does not even realize that he delivered most of that speech in rhyme, effectively concluding the final verse. Rhyme approaches him and compliments his skills as a rapper, which only confuses Togo. He then offers his hand and challenges Togo to a cipher battle someday. At that moment, Poem suddenly appears and scolds Togo, and Rhyme immediately notices their familiarity, growing suspicious about Togo's relationship with Poem. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.